this week, as we do in many weeks, we're going to mainly be focusing on TFM. And first off, so let's start with TFM, and I've slightly changed the order that it was in the blog post just to cover what I think people will find the most exciting at the beginning. And this is the weather SDK that TFM is making use of now. And a note that you do need to be using Active Sky for this to work. So I know some people have used FS Real World Weather, which is a great program and has certain advantages, including the fact that it covers most simulators all in one version. The options are much more accessible, but if you do want to have TFM make use of this SDK that I'm going to talk about in a minute, then you do need to be using Active Sky. So that's just one byproduct of this feature, unfortunately, but there you go. So it will be able to announce things like visibility. It'll be able to, or not necessarily announce, but I would imagine there'll be some kind of hotkey is what I'm talking about. Visibility, turbulence level, precipitation level and type, and also when you are entering clouds, which will be an automatic announcement. That particular part of the SDK. So if you are familiar with Eurofly, then that used to announce when you would enter clouds, and it'll be interesting to see how that works out in TFM, whether it's very verbose, and also get to see for ourselves how Active Sky models cloud layers, because it's very nice when you see these sorts of things. Okay, you've got broken clouds at 600 feet, you've got a thick cloud layer at 1500 feet, but it doesn't really do much for us. So now we'll actually be able to see, okay, we're fully in the clouds, and okay, now we're out of the cloud layer. It'll be pretty nice, and it'll be interesting to see how they model that within Active Sky and the simulator itself. So we'll have to see how that goes and whether people find it particularly useful. I think it's probably more of a sort of a feature just to add a bit more to your flights, to keep you occupied, as you're just on autopilot flying around. You can check these sorts of things. But you can see here, it'll tell you the precipitation type. So hail, snow, obviously rain, and also the things like the turbulence level, given the specific offsets. And I think that'll be useful because it's quite difficult to know from just the sounds, isn't it? Even though the PMDGs do come with turbulence sounds, at least in P3D, it can be difficult to know just how much you're getting bumped around just by looking at your vertical speed and hearing the sound. So actually to have that confirmation from TFM will be quite nice. Couple of the pointers then from TFM. They speak about Navigaph being removed from the current GitHub cycle because they're not being responsive to TFM, particularly in helping them add support, and that since TFM isn't using it, that isn't really important right now. I don't think anyone's going to really notice much of a difference there, of course, since it isn't really relevant right now, but hopefully Navigaph hurry up and get along with responding to TFM. The overhead main fuel panel has been added. That's the latest thing in the 747. That only has a few switches on it. I won't list them here. They mentioned that some panels have write-only segments, i.e. we cannot pull the current values, and so they will not be within TFM currently. This includes the EEC panel is talking about, the EMU, something to do with overhead maintenance, I believe, which is 748 only, and APU startup source, which is 748 only. So a couple of things that have previously been talked about. I know the APU startup source have been talked about, and some elements of the EEC that now aren't going to be in TFM. That's unfortunate, but obviously perhaps they've just discovered that, and that they're not actually going to be as useful to BVI pilots as initially thought, and there's not too much TFM can do about that. Couple of bug fixes here. The 737 heading box has been fixed. If you've tried the latest preview, you'll notice that the freeware heading box pops up when you do left bracket shift H. Thanks to a community member, Rob, I did learn from him that you can simply hit escape and the regular MCP heading box for the PMDG will pop back up. So it is still something you can get to in the latest preview, but in the next release it will be fixed. The build database feature has already been fixed as well. There was some people having issues where they would get .NET framework errors, and this has essentially been changed so that it will only allow you to build the database, and the button will only show if you actually load it into a simulator, whether that be P3D or MSFS. So some streamlining of that, and I can say that the reports are still coming in, that people saying even in P3D, the lag that they may have previously experienced that they didn't even put down to TFM has gotten better within TFM and the simulator in general since the update with the streamlining of database features. So clearly that's made a good impact upon usage. I wanted to mention the new First Officer update as well here. So this is coming on the 1st of February. If you want to see the main flagship feature in action, if you go to his YouTube, there is a 40-minute video or so on the GSX integration. As you all know, GSX is something that we haven't really been able to use as blind pilots in Microsoft Flight Simulator because of the way it uses the toolbar. However, this might be changing with First Officer's update. I say however, it might be changing because we don't know quite how integration is going to work and whether it's actually going to be more trouble than it's worth. I know a lot of people have been having good luck with the PMDG pushback, myself included. I mean, I haven't had any major issues with it, I have to say. So it's one of them things, whether you want to spend the extra money on GSX to have the GSX boarding and catering and things like that. But the idea is that this update, which, as I say, is scheduled to be released on the 1st of Feb, will have boarding and jetways and pushback all done automatically. So if you do not specifically request First Officer pushback with the ground to cockpit command, it will call the GSX tug. And so this is certainly interesting, and we'll have to see how well it works. We all know that GSX is prone to being quite buggy. Sometimes, it can do some very odd things. I think this is nice. I mean, it's an alternative to having FSFO board or something like that, because there is that integrated feature with First Officer, the boarding of passengers and cargo. So if you stream, maybe you want the visual aspect so people can see the passengers boarding and the cargo pallets loading and the jetway. If that's something you want, then GSX is probably a good thing for you, and perhaps it will be easier to use with this First Officer update, because I think a lot of people also found it kind of strange that as the pilot of an airplane in the simulator, you're the one who has to request all these ground services, when it would be nice to have automation, as if the ground crew is doing everything for you while you set up the aircraft, and that's more what this is aiming at. So I think that's interesting. There's a whole bunch of bug fixes in First Officer next update page that you can go and see on the First Officer forums. There's a whole bunch of talk about some features for the Airbus. One feature that did stand out to me was the OFP summary page, which is said to describe and present to you the basic info from your flight plan in an easy to access page. We all know, though, that First Officer Next does have accessibility issues, so quite how useful that's going to be is something we'll have to figure out when we get the update released. Other than that, we're done for this week. There is a BVI event on Saturday from Boston to Indy to Charlotte, so come along for that if you want. And other than that, not too much else to discuss, but I think people will be quite excited about the weather features of TFM. That will definitely be something I'll be looking forward to trying out especially. and perhaps GSX as well in Microsoft. So, all right, well, we'll see you in the next video, and hopefully you have a great week.